Hi everyone. Sorry, we are having some difficulties with the equipment here. I hope you can hear me well because we don't have the microphone, so now we are speaking through the computer. And yeah, so just what I was saying before, this is the second part of this important conversatorio in regard of extractivism organized by LASNET, the Latin American Solidarity Network. During the morning, we had the Spanish speakers. It was very interesting to have compañeros from Panama and also from Chile explaining what is happening in their territories at the moment. Just to open the second session, now here at the camp, sovereignty always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So we are very grateful that our brothers and sisters here allow us to host this important conversatorio in their land. And we are very grateful that there is a lot of people here supporting them in this important cause. So we are going to start with acknowledging, the land where we are. We are in Wurundjeri land, and also to pay our respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and or to leave very clear also that this land has never been ceded. And just moving into that, I would like to invite our first speaker. So, and our first speaker is Jaram. I can see that you are connected there. Sorry, Jaram, we have all the sun here. It's not that I can see very well the screen. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Oh, excellent. And thank you so much for agreeing to be here today and to talk about what's happening with your people and the campaign that you are at the moment. And also at the end, we would like to know where we can get more information and how we can support your struggle here in your territory. So I would like to leave with everyone, Jaram, speaking today here at the Camp Sovereignty.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you for, choosing this place to be able to speak and, have these important yarns and make these important connections from other First Nations around the world with our mob here in this ancient land. And I'd like to, start by paying my respects to the country which I'm yarning from today is the Peak-Wurrung Gunditjmara country, and also extend those respects to the Kulin Nations, Bunwurrung and Wurundjeri lands where you're speaking from today, and also extend that to your people and your ancestors from your countries as well. So, thank you so much for inviting me to have a yarn today. Really, really special that Camp Sovereignty is back up and, making that really important presence there on country again and at that beautiful site, in the midst of the concrete jungle. And, I just would like to yarn to you about our sea country and some of the things that are happening with my people. The last couple of years, we have been fighting to protect our sea country, among, a few other fights on the land, mostly against mining and the desecration of our sacred sites. And, for the sea country, we're fighting to protect the whale songline, but also the many songlines that interconnect through the land, sky and sea, the foundation of who we are as First Peoples of the land of the Rainbow Serpent, so-called Australia. And, so my name is Yaren Cousins Bundle. I'm a proud Gunditj Mara Yuin Bidra woman, and I'm a whale dreaming custodian. And so what that means is that I carry whale lore and whale story, and that story song that has been, sung and danced on our country for thousands of years, and celebrating and honouring that whale songline and that dreaming, that ocean dreaming, saltwater people that we're from the coast along southwest Victoria, so-called Victorian coast. So Gunditj Mara country starts along the west coast there, just past Aries Inlet, all the way west towards Cape Nelson, which is just near the South Australian border. And so all of that coastline is Gunditj Mara country. And I'm speaking to you today from Port Fairy, which is the Pigwurrung speaking people's country. And it's really vital that we get more of these yarns and education and awareness out about what's happening and what's planned to happen to our sea country. So we're currently fighting against quite a few seismic blasting projects that are earmarked for our whale birthing and calving areas. And these are the last southern right whale recorded birthing and calving areas in so-called Victorian waters and our Gunditj Mara sea country. And so we're really fighting to protect Kuntabul, which is our language word for southern right whale. And they are our ocean kin, our ocean family, and they're very interconnected with our women's business and dreaming and, the birthing cycles of Gunditj Mara people. So it's very vital that, these projects, gas exploration projects, don't go ahead, and that our sea country remains and the marine environment, remains somewhat intact from what it, used to be before colonisation to what it is today. And so for the people that don't know what seismic blasting is, it's the first step for gas and oil exploration. And what it actually is these sonic booms of sound from these massive big air guns that are towed from a seismic vessel, and they're setting off sound every 10 seconds for months on end, 24 hours a day. And those sound frequencies penetrate through the ocean floor, and it gives the gas people, a picture of where the gas pockets are, where they want to drill and extract the natural gas from underneath the ocean floor. So turn the water off, Yanni. So my little daughter in the background watering the plants. So these seismic blastings, they're set to blast an area of thousands. I think it's actually one of them's into the 1 million hectares of sea country, and they're blasting from the surface all the way down, and that sound travels underneath the ocean floor. So these sounds are as loud or louder than atomic bombs, and when you put sound into an ancient soundscape like the ocean, relies, the ocean is always moving, and a lot of the animals and species that call that place home rely on sound to navigate and migrate through sea country. And so it's really, really important that we get that awareness out there about the detrimental effects that will have on the very foundation of the ocean. So from the smallest, tiniest creatures in the ocean, the plankton families and the zooplanktons, right up to the largest creature on the earth, woolock, the blue whale. And so there has been a few studies done, not very many, unfortunately, but the ones that have been done have measured the effects of a seismic blast up to 2.5 kilometres in diameter around where the seismic vessels are. And it's shown to explode and kill plankton life in that immediate area. And unfortunately, there hasn't been much more studies done about the effects of after that 2.5K mark. So how far that actually is affecting that area of sea country. And we think it's a lot more than those 2.5Ks. We think that it's really, killing off large parts of these plankton life that actually sustain the rest of the life in the ocean. They feed everything in the ocean. So, and more importantly, they're the whales' food. And the whales come every year. They migrate up from the cold country down in the Southern Ocean. And, the pregnant mothers and the aunties, and they follow their song lines all the way up to the coast, and they use the coast to navigate and the underwater, what are they called? Underwater landmarks to navigate their way back to their calving and birthing grounds. So this is, really, really significant for the southern right whales. There's not a lot of them left. And if any of you know about the northern Atlantic right whales, they're on the brink of extinction. And some of those are from ship strikes, but a lot of it we believe to be industrialization and, desecration of the marine environments through gas and oil exploration. And so, we as Gunditj Mara whale dreaming custodians, we're saying no consent, and we want them, to pack up and get out and stay out of this beautiful sea country that we have the responsibility of caring for. And also, this area of sea country is part of a bigger interconnected environment called the Great Southern Reef. And not a lot of people know about this reef either, but it spans from Western Australia all the way along the southern coastline, right to sort of halfway up the east coast and all the way down around Tassie. And I think it's over 8,000 square kilometres of different mob sea country. But a big part of that sea country is whale songline country, and that whale songline that interconnects with all of these other saltwater mobs along the coast. And it goes right around Australia, this whale songline, and it's very, very significant. And we really need to put the government on notice, and the mining industry, you know, set those sovereign birthrights in the forefront of our fight, and follow our old ways in doing ceremony and on country and sea country, and educating people about the cultural significance of what we're fighting for, and how important these songlines are to protect and have them, from being unbroken, to respectfully protect them, and not have them being broken on our watch. And our old people being saltwater people, or we're saltwater and freshwater people, but being connected to the salt and the saltwater and the coast, that ocean has sustained our people for thousands of years. And to see, the amount of pollution and the amount of development that's going on is just really concerning, for our next generations, that we don't want to, leave them a world where they don't have a place of belonging. It's our place of belonging here on country, where our songs and ceremonies, are very powerful, and it connects us, through our blood and our spirits to strengthening us and who we are as First Nations, as Gunditj Mara custodians for country. And so it's really scary, the amount of extraction that they want to do with these natural resources, and basically it's for gas that we don't need. There's a narrative that we need more gas, and we need that to be a source that helps us shift into renewable energies, but it's just a lie. A lot of our gas is exported to other countries, and I said this, quite a few times, that like, if people need to understand, the depth of like how the processes are going through government and industry to pass these massive greedy projects, but also, the effects that will have on us and the marine life if they do go ahead. I just wanted to touch on Special Prospectors Authority, which they're called SPAs, and they're basically set up for the federal government, the resource minister, to basically give their one tick of approval for these, to pass these projects, having the okay to go ahead. And we think that that's, fundamentally wrong. It's a corrupt process, and it ties in with the very out-of-date native title and cultural heritage legislations that were written by white people, for white people and industry. They're not there to protect our cultural heritage. They're more so there to manage the destruction of it and mitigate the damage, in their terms. That's how they, explain that they're going to go ahead anyway, and they're going to manage the damage as best they can. But in saying that, we have thousands of beautiful endemic species that only call the Great Southern Reef and our sea country home. You won't find them anywhere else in the world. So like the weedy sea dragon, certain species of that, the wobbegong sharks, the southern right whales, the blue whales come at a certain time of year for the Bonnie upwelling, which is a natural cycle of the ocean where the cold water currents come and lift up the bring in vast amounts of krill, and then of course the whales and everything else that feeds on those plankton and krill species come with that upwelling. So that's just a few of the species that are going to be affected by this seismic blasting. Mainly the mammals that are using sonar in their natural sonar to navigate, migrate, communicate, and find food. So it's really amazing that, you know, in this day and age, with all of this research and technology that is available to us, that these studies haven't been done on hardly any of the species in the Southern Ocean. And they're still saying, well, we've got enough data, we've done enough research, and, you know, we're going ahead with this. And so we've had to, you know, spend the last couple of years writing submissions and to NOPSEMA, which is the National Offshore Petroleum Environment Management Authority, which also gives these approvals out to these mostly international companies that are coming to strip the resources and make mass profit for themselves, and that profit doesn't even go back to the Australian people. So it's really harsh to, you know, understand the harshness of the amount of death that's going to occur if these projects go ahead. So as a whale dreaming custodian, it's my responsibility to, you know, be the voice for our Kuntable Narakitong, our whale family, and share part of that story, that cultural story, but also educate people on the dangers of seismic blasting and how that's going to affect not just us as mob on country, but it's actually going to affect everyone else that loves and works and plays on the ocean. So all the local fishing industry, the tourism industry, and you know, right down to the health of the ocean and the temperatures of the ocean through this, quickening of climate change that's happening all around us. And so it's one of those things that we've wasted a lot of time writing submissions and challenging, state and federal government about, you know, how they're going about this. If you're, you know, in this space, you might have seen other First Nations like the Tiwi Islanders fighting Santos, and the custodians of the Murujuga art sites and sacred sites in Western Australia fighting Woodside, and many other First Nations around Australia, you know, challenging these industries and government to listen. We have this saying, consultation is not consent. It's part of their, you know, bodgy, corrupt process that they do to pass what they want, you know, for, like I said, mass profit for these international companies and nothing else, really. So, I just would like to also share a small part of the whale story. So, like I mentioned before, every year the Kuntabul, they come in the matrilineal herd, the mothers, the aunties, the grandmothers, and they have this old blood memory where they're supposed to go back to. Different groups of whales go to different birthing sites along this coastline, and only one of them is recorded and protected, and that's known as Logan's Beach. We call that place Kuntubuliaki or Kuntubuliakinich, which is our whale dreaming. The southern right whale, Waraknyan, which is their birthing area. So they birth along these different parts of the coast, and then they end up in taking their babies into the nursery just off the coast of Warrnambool, and they spend a few months there from May to September, or around that time, and that is the time when we do ceremony through the Bay, the Southern Lights, and through that song, that ocean song. So it's actually really vital that these songs keep being sung. They're connected to the births, the new births of Gunditjmara children, and also the little boop boop kuntabuls, the baby whales. And so a couple of years ago, we started reclaiming these birthing sites, going back to them and doing ceremony again. And then we actually had a bumper whale season that year. And we tell people, they're going, wow, there's so many whales here this year. And we say, yeah, we know. That's because the song is strong again. And it's strengthening every day with more young Gunditjmara people learning about this and participating in these ceremonies. And yeah, it's vital to who we are as Gunditjmara people for these ceremonies to continue. They interconnect with every other songline that is on the land and up into the sky country. And yeah, we hope that, we will gain the support and the momentum grows about, the significance of this story and how we can share more of that story in the future and get more people to come and stand with us and understand that this cannot be broken on our watch. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, sis, for heartbroken. Oh, but also it was so inspiring. What you said at the end with the whales and how you and your people are still fighting, trying to protect your territory. I think. Thank you so much. I'm gonna open now, if it's okay with you, sis, for some questions.
I wanted to ask you about on what can we do? How can we organize to demand that the studies be made, or maybe how we can, those of us who are close to universities or working in environmental spaces, how maybe we can contribute to this work as well. So that's one question about the need for those studies, why are they happening, and what can we do? And then the other thing I wanted to ask you was about which corporations and which extractivist interests in particular are the ones that are pursuing the blasting and seeking to benefit from and destroying sacred land. And thank you again.
Thank you for your question. And you said that Kuntabul Narakitung, you say that so good, and only hearing that like now. So thank you. That's really refreshing to hear people connect through that mother tongue. But yeah, it's mostly these giant international companies. So there's TGS and how do they pronounce it? Schlumberger. So I'm not sure exactly what country they represent, but their base is a huge glass skyscraper next to Buckingham Palace in the UK. So, that says a lot. And they want to do the largest seismic blasting project in the world in history. So bigger than anything in, the Arctic waters, US waters. Like this is huge. This is world, massive, world history kind of thing. There's also ConocoPhillips, which is an American company. There's CGG. I'm not sure where they're from, but from my perspective, I just see them all as colonizers trying to rape country and take what they want, and they don't care about the effects of what they're doing. There's also what's the other one? There's CGG. Oh, there's Regia, which again, I'm not sure exactly who they represent. There's also Beach Energy, which are a counterpart of Woodside, who are soon to be going to be, the biggest climate polluters going if their projects go ahead. So, yeah, some of these companies were eyeing off the Mirning people country, so along the Great Australian Bight. And there was a big campaign a few years ago where, there was Equinor and BP and a few other massive companies that were looking to drill again in Southern Right Whale, berthing and calving areas. And they actually won that fight and they got rid of them. And then some of them packed up and went home, and then some of those other companies come straight to Victorian waters and are looking to, just take from country. And so the federal government every year, they actually approach these companies and they say, what areas of the ocean do you want to explore? And these companies go back to the federal government and they say, we want to explore these areas. And then the federal government open up acreage. So they bid for certain parts of these acreage releases from the federal government. And, we just think that in itself is so corrupt and, a huge conflict of interest. Many of these companies, they're in the millions and billions of dollars. Hardly any of them have put dollars towards researching the damage that they're doing and the effects of, all these different species. And we say, well, how can you mitigate damage to species that you don't even know are there? There's a southern nautilus shell. There's all of these amazing seaweed species, which actually have planktonic life cycle as part of their growth. So there's little baby seaweeds floating in the water columns. And if they are blasted, then they will obviously not survive. And we used to have huge kelp forests, all the way around the Great Southern Reef, but they're dying off in really big numbers. And so, we think that we need to be able to lead the research that's being done, but unfortunately, you know, we're mob on the ground. You know, I'm a single mother of 4, and I'm a cultural custodian, so I'm doing the best I can to, you know, raise my children in culture, and you know, having to show them that, look, these are the challenges that we have to practice our culture and be who we are on our country. But a few years ago, I formed this group called the Southern Ocean Protection Embassy Collective, SOPEC for short. And part of the dream was to have a black fleet, have a small fleet of ships, ocean vessels that would participate in whale strandings and rescues, but also use them for research vessels to do our own research out on sea country. And, you know, that's still in the pipeline. We're still trying to get that up and running. And, you know, we're always looking for non-industry and non-government, you know, blood money funding to be able to do this. We, as First Nations people, our stories and our old knowledge systems and the knowledge that we carry about those songlines and dreamings, they interconnect with other songlines, so other you know, species in that interconnected kinship, reciprocal relationship that we need each other to survive, you know, and the different species that look after each other in the reef systems. And if one of those species is taken out, you know, then it starts this whole collapse of that cycle. And so we say that our knowledge is our data and our research, and it should be recognised as research and legit research through science. You know, we're among many other things, you know, the first scientists, the first bakers, the first astrologers, all of these things that, as you know, the oldest living continuum on the planet. So we think that we should be supported to do this really important research our way and on our terms kind of thing. And we're hoping to, you know, have more of those conversations with other independent funding bodies in the future to get that happening. But also, yeah, SOPEC had this dream of having a black fleet, but also having an education and research centre on land that would sort of act like an educational kind of, not a museum, but a place where, you know, we can all come together and learn about, yeah, what those cultural responsibilities are and caring for those different species that, you know, are still with us. And yeah, I think that it's really, you know, shame and so backwards that in this day and age of technology, you know, and having the different scientific knowledges to back us up with the research that we want to do. It's such a shame that, you know, there's only a small handful of scientists that will get behind us to do this work. Science is just catching up with our old knowledge systems. And so, yeah, it's quite frustrating, you know, to understand that this work needs to be done now, not 10 years down the track. You know, we need to shift to renewables. And, oh, there we go. My battery's getting low. shift to renewables and, find other sustainable resources to get away from fossil fuels. But yeah, one other thing, like I mentioned before, that these massive projects, it's not by mistake. Like, it's with our, corrupt government making deals with these massive international companies that basically have earmarked Australia to power the world. And if you look everywhere all around Australia, there's these massive projects, looking to be passed and developed. And I think the government have let down, the people they're meant to represent, and we're being used as a backwater to power the other, powers of the world, USA, China, all of these major unsustainable countries, really. And yeah, I hope that we get more support into the future. We've just started to, in April, we're going to have our official launch, but we've just started to do the work of another group that we've formed, Saltwater Peoples United, like a Black United Nations of saltwater people all the way around. A lot of them are whale people, to challenge industry and government and really make it quite a public issue specifically about research and education, but also, the corrupt processes that they're trying to pass, really. So we just recently heard about industry and government funded Sea Country Alliance, where they're going around getting all the prescribed body corporates, so all the First Nations corporations and land councils all the way around Australia, to try and undermine, the work that we're doing to protect. And we think that's another token, gesture of the government to try and remove our rights by getting other mob to speak for Sea Country. And yeah, I'm really angry and pissed off about that Sea Country Alliance being formed, and the cheek that they have to say that they're representing their nations. These are not all cultural people. These are people who work in corporations. Some of them, are our own mobs that shouldn't have the right to speak over the top of us cultural custodians that are trying to carry this through for the rest of our nations. So yeah, the more support we get in gaining, boats, ocean vessels, and funding for research, and to establish, websites to help educate people. I'm in the middle of doing an education package for schools, and that's one of my strategies, is to target the education system. And so from kindergartens all the way up to universities, and going into schools and start telling the whale story, and hopefully getting, the next generation, our future elders and warriors, to, arm them with education, and so we can be, challenging them into the future. Also, another strategy is through music, and bringing that song, to the forefront, that unconditional love that we have for our family, clan and country, but also all of the other First Nations around the world that have never ceded sovereignty and that are fighting to protect their sacred sites and their country and do their ancestors proud. So yeah, I hope that answered your question a little bit. And yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things like, say, our plan B, if they don't listen to us, we're planning to get boats and occupy sea country and actually block them when they bring their seismic vessels into our sea country. And yeah, and really make a stand and say, well, you know, now if you want to pass this, you're going to have to actively remove us, because we're out on sea country doing our ceremonies. And yeah, actually, that just reminded me, another part of that research. I want to go out there on the sea country, and I want to be singing and taking those old language words and those songs that belong, those sounds and frequencies from our language that belong on country, and doing research around those ocean languages, because every species has a language and way of communicating. You know, science just hasn't caught up to that yet. So I think that's going to be one major research point is through the song, and keeping that song strong. So yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much for the information. Yeah, it's incredible what you are doing. And as you said, you're a single mom, 4 children. I don't know where you get the time to do what you are doing. So
I take my kids with me everywhere.
No, I saw you. That's when I met you on the 6th of January at the steps of the Parliament.
Your way.
Yeah, remember for 3CR, we were doing some interviews. So yeah, you were the first person we interviewed that day. It was amazing, your message. Look, I'm not sure you want to say anything. The last word. I know that we will promote this information. Michaela is here, so I'm sure she will use it for 3CR also. Because I think the idea to support young people with that dream of having a float, you know, of Black people able to do something in case, you know, the government continue not listening to the voice of the people who knows that in this case is your people. I think that's a good idea that need to be shared everywhere so you can have people supporting financially and at the same time with resources. Is that what the people need? So we will push for that. I think that's very important. So I'm not sure we probably no more questions yet because of the time, but if you want to give us the last words or message, and what else do you think we can do and people who will listen this can do to help people and to make open the conversation, because I'm surprised that a lot of information that you gave us today, I had no idea. And I think probably a lot of people are in the same place I was before I listened to you now. So if you want to give us a message or request.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's been, you know, part of the way that they've gotten away with so many corrupt processes already, is to suppress so much information that only their yarns and their, you know, agenda is getting out to the public. And we have this, I'll just hold it up for the screen to you. We have this little poster with a bit of information on the back there about some of the projects that are happening, and our little social accounts there. On the front, there is a QR code which will take you to our Citizens Protection Declaration that we have put together through our Friends of the Earth. So if you want to Google drillwatch.com, that will take you to our protection declaration. And please, jump on there and add your signatures. And we hope to have a bit more of an educational kind of package with some little stickers and our flyers to be able to send out to groups like yourself and, all schools. On next Wednesday coming, on the 6th of March, there is going to be a Greens event at the Parliament House in Melbourne. There's going to be a rally on the steps and a bit of a press conference. It's for the Greens to read out their bill on banning new gas and oil explorations for offshore in the ocean. And that's going to be starting at 8:30 in the morning. They're reading the bill, and then we're going to be having a yarn and a bit of a rally out on the steps with some other groups that are a part of the Southern Ocean Defence Alliance. So there's quite a few groups that are now jumped on board to that. Finally got like the likes of Sea Shepherd, Ocean Network, which is a climate environment action network group along the based in Apollo Bay and along the Surf Coast. We'll have Friends of the Earth and Fight for the Bight Port Fairy, which was a group that was formed to help the Murning people that I spoke about earlier. So we're all going to be there on Wednesday morning. If you want to jump onto the socials, we're SOPEC on Facebook and Instagram, because that's sort of free. We don't have a website as yet, but the events are posted on both those sites, so you can jump on there and have a look and double check times and things. And then on Wednesday night in Collingwood Yards, I'll be participating in an event called Weaving Our Stories, supporting the Torres Strait family and their plight for their sea country, and, climate justice. They're actually going to be and already being affected by climate change and the oceans rising and washing away some of their burial grounds and other sacred sites on their islands. And so there's going to be a yarning panel, and I think there's music and spoken word and a few other things happening at the event. So I'll be one of the panel speakers there. But we're hoping to get as many people as we can to the steps of Parliament on Wednesday morning, which I'm going to ring up Uncle Robbie and Lydia today and follow up with them as well. And, just try and get more awareness out there. Later this year, there's going to also be Protection of Sea Country Bill, which was brought in by Senator Dorinda Cox from WA. And so there's going to be a series of hearings that SOPEC and other whale dreaming whale law holders will be a part of. So we'll keep you all posted when that happens, I think April and May. Just that we will keep coming like the waves of the ocean. We will never, ever give up or cede sovereignty. And, they can try their best to stop us, but we are powerful on our country, and we will continue to rise in our power in protecting our sacred songlines and our sites for the future of our babies and our future generations, but for everyone. If the oceans die, we die. And it's the blue lung of our planet. So, thank you all very much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Information and that you and other people are doing so much to protect that area, that we will make sure people will come on Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. at the Parliament steps, yeah? And definitely, I will see how we can continue supporting the struggle in the future. So it's going to be, yeah, now that we know it, will be ridiculous if we don't step in and try to help and support in whatever way we can. So yeah, so thank you so much everyone for coming today. Thank you so much, Jaron, for all that information and taking your time, to yeah, to tell your story and also all this information. And we will see you the next month when.
Thank you so much, everyone. Deeply grateful, and I'll try and come down there in person next time. Because I want to make my way there eventually. Come and have a yarn with Uncle Robbie and come and connect in person. So yeah, thank you all so much. And perfect timing because my little whale baby just woke up. So
Well, thank you. Thank you.
thank you
Thank you.
very much. Bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dani. I am a member of the organization Liberación in Chile. First, I would like to thank LASNET very much for the opportunity to speak. Sorry I can't actually be there live, but I'm very happy to be able to send in this video, and hopefully this is a topic that you guys can continue discussing after this short presentation that I've prepared. So I was asked to talk about neoliberalism in Chile, its history, and how it persists until today. So just to sort of begin with a quick contextualization, just in case people aren't familiar with Chilean history, neoliberalism essentially came here in 1973 after the democratically elected Salvador Allende government, which was a reformist socialist government, was toppled by a US-backed dictatorial regime. That happened in September 1973, and the Pinochet regime implanted the economic policies that are now known as neoliberalism. Chile was actually one of the first countries in the world to suffer under neoliberalism. That's why people often refer to it as a sort of laboratory for neoliberalism. And in between the periods of 1973 to 1989 is when the dictatorship was in place, and that's when the neoliberal model was implanted. And so the neoliberal model is very, very like just skimming over that concept, but like it is a form of capitalism where essentially everything is a consumer good and everything is like reigned by the free market essentially. So there's very, very minimal to no state intervention in the market, and that includes in things like health or education, etc. But it also includes other things like, for example, mining industry. There is just no or very little state presence, economically speaking, under neoliberal regimes. This model, after the dictatorship, was consolidated by the subsequent democratic governments that basically just stayed in line with the neoliberal policies implemented by the dictatorship, with very slight modifications in some cases, mostly as a response to social upheaval and protests and resistance, but basically staying in the same line. So what does the neoliberal model existing in Chile mean for us in practice and in our daily lives? Basically, it means that for everything that could be conceived as a sort of social right, there is a private system and an underfunded public system, and mostly things are solved through the private system. So, for example, in education, this means that while you do technically have the right to go to school and get an education, or at least up to secondary education, the municipal state educational system is severely underfunded because most things are solved through a private through either fully private schools or subsidized private schools, which is where the state essentially gives gives the schools funding, but they are privately held and privately operated, and people have to pay a small, usually, amount of money to get into those schools, not compared to fully private schools. Or it used to operate through a system of vouchers. So this essentially means that there's like 3 educational systems: the fully private, the subsidized private, and the public education system. And because most of the state funds are diverted towards the subsidized private system, the public educational system, which serves most of the students in Chile, is completely underfunded. The infrastructure is just not there. There's actually in a northern region of the country, there was a teacher strike going on for several months last year, because the infrastructural conditions were it made it impossible for anybody to teach any classes. The bathrooms weren't working, ceilings were caving in, etc. That level of infrastructural problem is present in our public schools. And actually, in the same region, none of those problems have been solved, and it's very likely that when the school year starts up again in a few days, they'll start on strike. This is also true in other areas of life, like for example, in health, there is a public healthcare system, and there's also a lot of private clinics, and all of that is done mostly through private insurance companies. And the problem is that the public health system, which serves the vast majority of the population, is also severely underfunded, understaffed. Last year, they cut a bunch of staff that they had hired under COVID, even though wait lists are sometimes years long, depending on the procedure or specialist you're trying to see. They're still cutting funding to that. And so for a lot of people, then the only option becomes to pay out of pocket for a clinic that's on the cheaper side, or wait years on a waiting list. Or sometimes it's hours in the emergency room waiting too. Basically, the public health infrastructure has really suffered because there's no real investment in it, even though it serves the vast majority of the population. This also happens, for example, in pensions, which are completely privatized here in Chile. What happens is that if you have a formal employment, your employer has to pay a certain percentage of your wage to a private pensions fund, and then you pay this every month, and then that gets invested, and then after you retire, you get paid back from that money that was invested. And this is completely privately run, generating a lot of problems with pensions because there's very little in the way of state funding any kind of pensions pay. There is like a very, very small amount that gets sort of added to people, given to people who have very low or no pensions, but it's less than minimum wage, so it's completely unlivable, especially when most of these people who retire need medication or medical treatments that are very expensive or are otherwise not very available. So this has very direct ramifications in the way that we live, because none of these things are conceived of as things that we have a right to have because we're people. Instead, they're consumer goods that we have to access in the free market, which means there's open competition and monopolies and that kind of thing. And there's the public infrastructure that does exist to serve the population is severely, severely underfunded. And these are things that have prevailed even after the dictatorship ended, because the interests of capital are very tied up. So, like, for example, the pensions funds invest in some big national corporations. And when I say national, I mean that they're owned by the national bourgeoisie, not owned by the state. So it's very difficult to try to get rid of this old pension system because the financing of some really big companies in Chile depends directly on the investment with workers' wages that comes in from the pensions funds. So it's all very tied up together. There's also a lot of interest, for example, in the educational system, because a lot of private subsidized or private schools are actually operated by the church or by evangelical churches. And so that's kind of also been part of what's helped it prevail through time, despite the fact that there have been protests and resistance. For example, in the three areas that I mentioned, education, pensions, and health, there's obviously a lot of other things. For example, in terms of housing, a lot of the same problems tend to crop up. But just to stick to those three examples, education's, pensions, and health have seen massive popular movements striking and protesting and resisting against them. In particular, in education, we have a student movement that's been very, very active in over the past 20 years, protesting against this sort of free market model of education and against the poor infrastructural conditions in which students have to get their education if they're being educated in a public school. And this organization has allowed some victories. For example, the student movement was able to attain a reform that allows people up to a certain income bracket to access free university. But even that, for example, is done through a sort of subsidizing logic, because what happens is that you apply and the state pays your private university instead of you paying the private university, and that's how that's resolved. So it's still like the private university is still taking a profit from that, and it's still seen as a consumer good. It's just that the state is subsidizing a person's access to it. But that being said, there have been large movements. So, for example, there's also a pensioners movement against the private pension system, and there's been a lot of movements in terms of improving public health infrastructure, and also workers' movements within health, because, like I said, the private healthcare system is so severely underfunded that labor conditions there are very precarious, and people are laid off. For example, after COVID, like I mentioned. So there's also been sort of movements around all of these things. So there's protests and embers of resistance. We also see communities organizing and coming together to do things like, for example, in terms of housing, basically the only way really to access subsidized housing is to organize into a group that can opt for a subsidy together. So there are lots of forms of popular resistance to neoliberalism in our daily lives, but it's still a system that is entrenched and implanted. I did want to say, though, that the problem is not just neoliberalism. The problem is capitalism, because neoliberalism is just a form of capitalism, but it's not the only form of capitalism. And a nicer form of capitalism would still have all these problems. And it's not even just capitalism, it's also the patriarchy, and it's also colonialism, which sort of entrench all of these systems in our daily lives, in the lives of workers and women and etc. everywhere. So I think that the important thing here is that even though the neoliberal system in Chile has prevailed, and there have been movements and protests against neoliberalism in education, pensions, health, housing, etc., we can't just stop short at protesting neoliberalism. What we actually have to aim at is capitalism, because capitalism is the problem that underlies the problem of neoliberalism. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So once again, thank you so much to LASNET for allowing me to ramble with you guys. I'm sorry I couldn't be there live, but hopefully you got something out of this presentation. Thank you so much.